Thank you very much for this kind introduction. So, dear colleagues and students, first of all, I would like to thank Professors Lauriane Bruno, Charles Rambers, and Michel Collas for their invitation. I am delighted to be taking part in the European Society for the Study of Central Asian and Himalayan Civilization Conference cycle. I am pleased to present this communication dedicated to the description of the assault of Māra in the literary tradition of the Buddhist canon, with particular attention to the depiction of the demon warrior sons of Māra armies confronted with their representation in the art of Haḍḍa, monasteries, along with parallel in Gandhāran and Indian art. The demonstration will address several key issues. How closely did Buddhist artists adhere to religious texts in their work? To what extent do they deviate to use their imagination in the creative process? Can we discern which narrative have had a predominant influence on a particular artistic school? And in this case, is it possible to cautiously question what this might reveal about religious practice within a specific monastery? Let us begin by examining the narrative of the legendary episode known as the Assault of Māra, as it is reported in three major works of the literary tradition: the Buddhacharita by Ashvaghosha, composed around the 2nd century CE, the Mavastu, whose composition began as early as the 1st century CE and concluded no later than the 4th, 5th century, and the Lalita Vistara Sutra, whose writing began as early as the 2nd century CE and was completed no later than the 7th century. The episode takes place just before the Enlightenment. In brief, it recounts how Siddhartha, the future Buddha, seated in meditation under the people tree, but the Bodhi tree or tree of enlightenment, endures the final attack from Māra, the god of desires, and his armies, intending to prevent him from achieving enlightenment. Siddhartha resists all the successive assaults, which symbolize the desires from which he will ultimately be freed. I am relying on the translation of the Sanskrit version of the Buddhacharita by Johnston, 1936, and Olivel, 2008. The legendary episode is recounted in Canto 13, titled Victory over Māra. When that great seer, the Bodhisattva, sat down there with a pledge to win release, the world rejoiced, and yet Māra, foe of true Dharma, shook with fright. The one that people in the world call God Kama, the one with flower arrows and colorful bow, the one who oversees the working of passions, the same one they call Māra, the foe of release. His three sons, fluster, thrill, and pride, and his three girls, discontent, delight, and thirst, asked why his mind was so troubled. This is followed by an address to his army and an argument designed to impress the Bodhisattva, urging him to enter into Mahaparinirvana immediately without teaching the Dharma to others, accompanied by threats. However, Siddhartha remains unperturbed, which, far from discouraging Māra, only intensifies his anger. No sooner then had Māra thought of his army, wishing to hinder the calm of the Shakya sage, than his cohorts in diverse forms gathered round him, carrying in their hands spears, trees, javelin, clubs, and swords, some with face of boars, fish, horses, donkeys, and camels, some with the guise of tigers, bears, lions, and elephants, some with one eye, some with many mouths, with three heads, with enormous stomach, some armed with tusks, talons, with skull-as faces, with many bodies, with half their faces torn off, with colossal mouths, some with ears as big as an elephant, some wearing animal skins, some completely naked, some with clanging bells hanging from their girdles, some as tall as palmyra trees and carrying spears, some with faces of sheep and eyes of birds, faces of cats and bodies of men, some with disheveled hair, some with excited faces or frowning faces, some jumped upon one another, frolicked rising up into the sky, one danced brandishing a trident, one bellowed with joy like a bull, one blazed fire from every air. Unfortunately for Māra, this display of spectacular monstrosities provokes no further reaction for the future Buddha. Further in the text, then to his frenzied armies of Finns, Māra gave orders to frighten him. His troops then, each with his special power, set their minds to breaking his resolve. They stood there trying to frighten him, some with multiple tongues dangling and quivering, some with sharp and pointed fangs, some with eyes like the sun orb, some with ears upright like spikes, some leaping up into the sky hurled at him rocks, axes, and trees, but they hung in the sky and did not fall. Another flung a blazing stack of straw as large as a mountain peak, but as it was thrown and still in the sky, it shattered into 100 pieces by his miraculous power. The attacks multiplies. However, the future Buddha remained immersed in meditation. A divine voice rises to convince Māra that it is futile to persist, that it has failed. After he listened to those words of his and saw that the great sage couldn't be shaken, then Māra went away, broken-hearted, his efforts struck down by the same arrows with which the world is smitten in the earth. Then his troops fled in every direction, their euphoria gone, their toil made fruitless, the rocks, logs, and trees all scattered around, like enemy troops when their enemy has killed their chief. The narrative also adds that as the flower-bannered one fled defeated along with his cohorts, patient-free, the great seer stood victorious and dispelling darkness. Thus ends the 13th canto of the great poem composed by Ashvaghosha. The preamble of the episode is different in the Mahavastu. We are relating on the translation by Jones from 1949-1956. In a section titled The Temptation of Māra, the text describes Māra 10 great laugh or 16 groans, to which the future Buddha responds with 14 threats and defeat his enemy through 4 glances, 4 yawns, and 4 couts. It is further in the text in a section titled The Final Defeat of Māra that the Mahavastu provides a description of the demons of Māra army. Again did Māra don his great armor, and he drew near to the Bodhisattva at the foot of the Bodhi tree with his great army of 4 arms, making the whole ground for 30 yojanas around the throne. He mounted his chariot, to which 1,000 horses had been yoked, carrying a dazzling bow, armored and mailed, with banners and flags flying, to the accompaniment of many drums, tabors, kettle drums, cymbal, trumpet, and attended by an army of frightful and monstrous beasts, which made a rumbling clamor. Some of these beasts had the faces of horse, others of buffaloes, goats, rams, deers, tigers, and so on. Some were headless trunks, others were one-headed, others many-headed, others two-headed. Some were eyeless, others one eyes. Some were without hand, or others without feet, without arm, or had 10 arms. Some carried knives, swords, hatchets, spikes, tridents, hammers, skulls. They breathed fire from their mouths, other snakes, some brandishing in the air wheels with blade on their rims. Some rushed on foot against the Bodhisattva, carrying an elephant, a buffalo, a horse, and so on. Other mountain tops, other wall trees, including the roots. Some rained down from the sky shower of hot embers, other showers of snakes or stone. Some rushed on the Bodhisattva mounted on elephant, horses, but the Bodhisattva did not turn a hair or change his heart. Then he struck the earth with his right hand, a gem of a hand marked with a bright streak, beautifully by being painted, and so on. And the earth thus struck reverberated. Deeply and distinctly it resounded and re-echoed. And Māra's army, as it reverberated, was split, torn, broken up, and turned away. Their elephants, horses, chariots collapsed, their feet, hands, and weapons collapsed. They lost their direction, taking the wrong way, fell into the river Nairanjana. Some fell on the left side, others on the right side, other on their back, on their feet, on their knees, other on their head, other on their faces. In fear and terror, they cried out to one another. The Lalitavistara Sutra significantly expand on the description of the legendary episode, presented it under the title Conquering Māra. Once again, the episode here, chapter 21, begins differently, knowing that he cannot attain enlightenment without defeating his old enemy Māra. Siddhartha emits a radiant beam from the urna and recites a gada of provocation that generates 32 nightmares for the god of desires, each illustrating and foreshadowing his defeat. Outraged that his dominion is being challenged, Māra then gathers his sons and daughters, his followers, and his armies. Then, despite the reasoned warnings given by one of his own sons, Sartavaha, Māra launched the attack, which take the form of successive waves of assault. Our source is the plain full Lalitavistara, translated by the Dharmakaya Translation Committee in 2013. Monks, Māra, the evil one, gathered all 4 divisions of his great and powerful army. The soldiers were able to transform their faces in 1 trillion ways. On their arms and legs glittered hundreds of thousands of snakes, and in their hands they brandished swords, bows, arrows, darts, lances, vajras, spears, and so on. Their bodies were covered in finest cuirasses and armor. Some had their heads and or feet turned backward or their eyes facing backward. Their heads and faces were ablaze. Their bellies, hands, and feet were deformed, and their faces brimmed with vehement ardor. Their mouths, with protruding ugly fangs, appears contoured in the extreme, and their thick and broad tongues dangled from their mouths. Their eyes were blazing red, as if on fire. Some ate human flesh and drank blood, chewing on human arms, legs, heads, and livers, and slurping entrails, feces, and vomit. Some had ugly hollow eyes like whales. Others had eyes that were gouged out, eyes that were ablaze or disfigured eye sockets. Some had ugly eyes rolling and blazing. Some carried flaming mountains in their head. Others ran toward the bodhisattva carrying trees that had been uprooted. Some had ears like goats, demons, elephants, pigs. Others had no ears at all. Some had swollen bellies and weak bodies with their bones sticking out. So they had broken noses, bellies like barrels, and feet round as balls. Their skin, flesh, and blood had dried out, and their ears, noses, hands, feet, eyes, or heads were cut. Some were so thirsty for blood that they would cut each other head off. They would make snappy, ugly, terrifying sound. Others called, "Grab the mendicant Gautama along with his tree. Let's make sure that he is cut, slashed, tied, harassed, cut in pieces, destroyed." They were disfigured and caused terror with their awful faces of foxes, jackals, peels, elephants, and so on. Some had animal bodies like lions, tigers, monkeys, crocodiles, ravens, garudas, etc. Some had misshapen forms. Some had just one head, but others had 2 or more, some even up to 100,000. Some had no head at all, the same for arms and legs. Some had poisonous snakes emerging from their bodily aperture, ears, mouth, nose, eye, and belly button. They brandished many weapons. Some of them wore garlands of human figures that they had cut off and strung together. Others wore on their head bones and skulls that they had strung into garlands. Some were holding skulls and rode on elephant, horses, camel, donkeys, buffaloes. Some had their heads pointing down and feet up. Some had needle-like hair on their head. Others had hair like oxen, donkey, jackal, and so on. They were vomiting poisonous snakes, spitting out lumps of iron, spewing fire, and produce a rain of flaming iron and copper. They sent rain with thunder, released bolts of lightning, caused the rain with hot iron sands, gathered black clouds, and make storms arise. They're causing swishing sound and they run toward the Bodhisattva. In this way, they came running, throwing their limbs in the air and rocking their bodies. They cried out loudly in laughter, their heads flaming with the hair streaming upward. Awful forms of demonesses, flesh-eaters, and angry spirits, one-eyed, limping, and with anger in their eyes, ran toward the Bodhisattva with outstretched hands, distorted faces, and terrifying cries. They were fearful and horrifying. Such an army of demons formed in a big gathering, stretching 8 leagues on every side. Just like this single army, so too the armies of hundreds of zillions of evil demons residing in the great trichilial cosmos spread themselves around the Bodhisattva in horizontal and upward directions. We now know the narrative. Despite this display of terrifying intimidation tactics, Siddhartha, I quote, seals all the phenomena like an illusion, a dream, and like clouds. At this point in the narrative, the Lalita Vistara again differs from the other 2 canonical texts, which is significant. It reports that following these failed attacks, Māra's sons, his army, split into 2 groups. One group led by Sartavaha, remember the same one who had previously tried to dissuade him before the initial assault, supported the future Buddha, while the other group continued to support their father Māra. Monks among the 1,000 sons of Māra, the evil one, there were some, such as Sartavaha, who began to feel devotion towards me, the Bodhisattva. They all assembled on the right side of Māra, the evil one, while those who supported Māra took a stand on his left side. A lengthy debate and dispute followed, with half of Māra's sons in his army taking the side of Bodhisattva through a series of arguments and pleas. For instance, you may proudly assume, yet even thousands of beings like you would be unable to move a single hair on that wise Bodhisattva. Father, even if one could bind the sun, the moon, and the wind with a noose, one could still not move the Bodhisattva from the seat of awakening. He is filled with love for sentient beings. No weapon or poison will be able to harm him. So, Father, please let us all turn back. He is about to become king of the 3 realms. Turn back and do not make war. Furious, Māra, seeing his children's subjects and his domain slipping away from him, renewed the assault. He hurled an invective at the future Buddha, claiming that there are no witnesses to his supremacy over this world. Thus, Siddhartha called the earth to witness on his behalf, an episode that is implied, though not explicitly stated in the Mahavastu. As soon as she was touched by the Bodhisattva, represented in art by the Bhumispar Samudra gesture, the goddess Earth, Stavara, began to quake and tremble in 6 ways. In other versions, Gautama's libation to the earth along his previous lives was so numerous that she caused a flood when she twisted her hair, which swept away the demonic cords. It is the goddess herself who thus commands Māra to cease the attack. Annoyed and unwilling to admit his defeat, Māra then sent his 3 daughters, Trishna, Rati, and Arati, already mentioned in the Buddha Charita, to tame the future Buddha. They assembled in front of the Bodhisattva and began displaying the 32 ways of female trickery, borrowed by the compilers of the Lalita Vistara from the ancient Indian erotic manuals. The faces of the Bodhisattva, however, remains as pure as stainless as the orb of the full moon. A lengthy argument ensues between them and the future Buddha, followed by a fierce diatribe against the emptiness and horror of flesh, which deterred them from their goal. They eventually give up and return to Māra, advising him, "Father, it would be better to leave him alone today." Nonetheless, enraged by his repeated failures, Māra addresses the Bodhisattva. "I am the Lord of desires and master of the universe. I rule over gods, demigods, humans, and animals. All of them fall under my control. So get up. Since you are in my realm, follow my orders. If you are master of sense pleasures, You are clearly not a master at all. Look who I am in reality. I am master of the Dharma, the future Buddha retorts. Beside himself, Māra unleashes one last grandiose attack, a kind of final, which has no more effect than the previous one. Weapons turn into flowers and poison into light. I returned to the text. As Māra's body started to sweat, his splendor disappeared and his face grew pale. Māra now saw himself overcome by old age. His elephants, horses, conveyance, and chariots are felled to the ground. The yakshas, kumbhandas, and flesh-eaters were terrified and run. Disoriented, they could not find their way, and without resting place or protection, they fled like birds seeing a forest fire. I did not listen to the kind and helpful advice of my sons and offended against a perfectly pure being. Therefore, I now reap suffering, fear, misfortune, grief, ruin, lamentation, loss of honor, and this miserable state. Considering the literary tradition, it becomes clear that Māra's army was perceived as an allegory by exegetes and monks. This is evident, for example, in the name of his daughter, which are quite suggestive. In the Buddha Charita, they are discontent, delight, and thirst. In the Lalita Vistara, they are rati, pleasure, arati, displeasure, and trishna, desire. Most of the descriptive elements are found in all three texts, with a few exceptions. Māra, armed with his attribute, the bow, appears in the Buddha Charita and the Mahavastu, but not in the Lalita Vistara. The list of weapons is quite similar, but the armors are absent in the Buddha Charita, with only Māra wearing one in the Mahavastu, while only the Lalita Vistara mentioned demon sons also wearing armors. The demon sons are described in three ways: as armed human warriors, as hybrid creatures, chimera that are part human and part animal or entirely animal, and as terrifying figures, monsters, and ghouls. However, while all three traditions mention these three types, a detailed examination of the text revealed that the Mahavastu places greater emphasis on the description of hybrid and animal warriors. The Buddha Charita equally developed description of both monster and hybrid animals, and the Lalita Vistara focuses more on the description of monsters and horrifying creatures. It is also noteworthy that all three traditions highlight the notion of noise, clamor, and cacophony accompanying the demonic horde, whether through their cries, howls, laughter, musical instruments, or the natural phenomena triggered by the battles, storms, lightning, thunder, rain, earthquake, and so on. Additionally, all three texts emphasize the description of characters physically attacking the bodhisattva and the bodhi tree through various assaults and maneuvers. Regarding the course of the legendary episode, and especially its conclusion, the Buddha Charita and the Mahavastu only describe the retreat of the defeated armies. Only the Lalita Vistara mention both the debacle and the flee of the demons, as well as their submission and conversion to the future Buddha, emphasizes that Māra loses not only his kingdom, but also his subjects. Gradually, the instigator of the failed attack, led by Sartavaha, acknowledged the future Buddha's supremacy and joined him. Then, first half of the sons in Māra army, and then his daughter, bow before the absolute sovereignty of the Bodhisattva and his Dharma. This evolution, this transformation of the legendary story and its overlay with the original version seems moreover to lack logic. We see the armies submitting and fleeing simultaneously. It is likely that the authors of the Lalita Vistara did not dare to entirely remove the original version in order to replace it with the submission of the armed legions. They may have thus opted to overlay the two versions. Additionally, only the Lalita Vistara mentioned Māra's feeling of regret and remorse. Finally, it should be noted that, again, only the Lalita Vistara explicitly developed the episode of the call of the earth to witness, although it is foreshadowed in the Mahavastu. Here is the scene as traditionally depicted in Gandhāra. True to the literary description we have just examined, Māra's sons are depicted in human form as armed warriors, as well as in the form of hybrid creatures featuring animal faces or anatomical parts. We will not detail this composition as usual, register by register, but for the purpose of demonstration by groups of characters. In the center is the future Buddha, seated under the Bodhi tree, making the Bhumisparsa mudra gesture, the call of earth. In front of the throne on which he is seated, Stavara, the goddess of the earth, appears emerging halfway from the ground in a burst of vegetation, smiling, with a face and hands raised toward him. From all sides, Siddhartha is besieged by the army of demons. Among these figures, let us first focus on the warrior in the foreground with a bare, muscular chest. Dressed in a paridana, he displays an elaborator style with hair falling in flat strands, framing his face, gathered into a top knot. Amidst the strands, we can discern flowing ribbons and ornaments. He is depicted from the back in the act of striking, with one foot placed on a lion or panther. He brandishes his sword, ready to strike the bodhisattva. He is the one who launches the assault. It is very likely that this figure represents Māra himself in the form of the handsome Deva or god. Facing him is a proud warrior, depicted as a Devaputra, a son of God, which he is, wearing a dress similar to that of the bodhisattvas, an ornate turban with a palmet, a wide, elaborately designed necklace, and an armlet adorned with a medallion. His posture, mirroring that of the Māra symmetrically, is full of confidence. Dressed in a dhoti with one foot placed on a lion, he brandishes his sword at chest height. Let us now examine this soldier who has taken on the appearance of a Brahmin with a wild hair and beard, wearing heavy dangling earrings and armed with a kind of spear that he holds firmly with both hands. Facing him is an helmeted, mustached fighter, also wearing heavy circular earrings, armed with a trident that he wielded with both hands. In the upper register, we see a drummer accompanying the armored cohort. The character, bearded and helmeted, carried the instrument on his back with the help of a strap. A warrior wearing a turban tied at the temple brandishes a type of short mace with his right hand and holds a skull in his left hand. Above him, it is difficult to determine whether the figure is a demon wearing a lion skin or a demon with two overlapping faces combining human and animal features. This ambiguity is reflected in the change of color. Behind the demon we assume to be Māra, a character with wild hair bound by a headband. He is almost nude, wearing a belt made of a thin cord from which hang decoration, possibly small leather pouches. He holds in both hands something he is in the process of devouring. This relief is unfortunately damaged at this point, and according to the text, it might be preferable that this remain unclear, as it likely represents an unspeakable feast. The demon legs, broad as described in the text as being like barrels, and in camel-like feet. Symmetrically positioned, another terrifying character with hair standing on end as if it were on fire. And we remember the mention of blazed fire from everywhere air in the Buddha Charita, or their air blazing heads with air flowing upward in the Lalita Vistara. He is equipped with boar tusks, almost nude. He wears a feathered belt. It is difficult to discern whether he is clad in a minimalist loincloth or if it is naked. On his lower abdomen, the demon displays a second face with an animal-like appearance. He holds a massive weapon against his thigh, ending in a blunt metal or stern head. In his other hand, he wields a serpent raised to waist high. Finally, his leg end in elephantine feet. On either side of the future Buddha, we can see demons, one with a monkey head, the other with a goat or ram's head with curved horns, unfortunately broken. So it is quite evident all the iconographic elements of this representation demonstrate the artist's deep knowledge of the description of the scene and the demonic characters from the literary tradition. We see warriors with human appearance, hybrids with camel or elephant feet, demons with animal heads, hair standing up as if on fire, as well as weapon, trident, mace, swords, and musician. Let us examine a second representation with this bas-relief. Here on the throne, it is not the earth goddess Tavara who is depicted. The Bhumispar Samudra alone is sufficient to signify the episode. In front of the throne are two heavily armored soldiers wearing helmets, carrying weapons, and dressed in armor, chainmail, and fringe skirts made of leather strips. They appear defeated at the feet of the future Buddha. One is falling backward onto the ground, still holding his sword and shield, while the other is stumbling face down, his axe fallen to the ground. And we remember this specific mention in the Mahavastu. The artist has paid particular attention to depicting the warriors' equipment described in the text. In the foreground, we see human-like warriors, armed Devaputra, probably Māra himself to the right of the Bodhisattva, raising his hand. Some soldiers are clad in chainmail and leather skirts. The posture of this group is noteworthy. Symmetrically arranged, the closest warrior to Siddhartha, armed and threatening, is being restrained by a second figure dressed like a Devaputra, but unarmed and with the novice topknot. As the far left of the relief, a similar figure is seated on a wooden woven seat in a royal resting position, with his foot on a stool under a tree. With his hand to his head, he appears to be lamenting. This is most certainly Sartavaa, Māra's son, who attempts to dissuade his father from launching the attack. The figures with novice topknots represent his lives, supportive of the future Buddha, trying to dissuade their demon brothers from continuing the futile endeavor. Let's now examine the rest of the army. To the right of the image, on the upper register, we observe a combatant lifting a huge rock, as described in the Buddha Charita, for example, smiling in anticipation of his misdeed. There is also a demon in the form of a monkey, riding a rearing horse and trying to climb onto Siddhartha, a mustached warrior riding a camel and shaking a bell, another figure holding an object that is difficult to identify, accompanied by a decorated elephant, standing on its hind legs, balancing a sphere, possibly a projectile, on the tips of his trunk. To the left of the image, on the upper register, we see a demon with boar's head, wielding a sword, another with a goat-like head, attacking the body tree by grabbing its branches, and one in the form of a monkey who has just drawn his sword from its sleeve. They are accompanied by a soldier armed with a trident and an helmeted warrior in armor who is beating a drum with a stick. The drum is carried by a rope held by a naked figure with a grimacing face and a guater. Finally, there is a demon in the form of a Brahmin holding a serpent, a motif that we observe to be popular. The Gandhāra school of sculpture, as evidenced by these two examples, were dedicated to faithfully following literary tradition in the creation of religious tableaux. Despite the constraints imposed by the rigid nature of stone representation and the technique of bas-relief sculptures, which allow for little detail and individualization, the artist endeavored to depict the characters of the demoniac army in accordance with their description in the text. They aim to convey the various aspects, details, characteristics, and actions attributed to them, such as the demon lifting a rock to crush the bodhisattva, hybrid warriors mounted on animals attempting to overwhelm him or attack on the trees. thanks to the flexibility offered by stucco and clay, materials that are fluid and malleable. Some artists were able to create works of exceptional realism and vibrancy. In particular, at Haḍḍa, the sculptors and modelers allowed their artistic creativity and penchant for the terrifying, even the repugnant, to flourish. Some of you may not be familiar with Buddhist archaeology in Afghanistan, and specifically with the monastery of Haḍḍa. I encourage you to consult the works of Alfred Fouché, Jules Barthou, Shaibai Mostamini, and Zemaria Laitarzi, as well as my own contributions, including a database dedicated to the artistic production of the Haḍḍa school. The Haḍḍa Archeo database is available online at the following URL, haḍḍaarcheodb.com, or by scanning this QR code. Located about 12 kilometers south of the present-day city of Jalalabad, the monasteries of Sangharamas of Haḍḍa were among the renowned religious centers along the Silk Road that welcomed pilgrims on their journey between India and China through Greater Gandhāra. Upon its discovery, Haḍḍa's art impressed by its high aesthetic quality. Its decoration was mainly modeled and reflected a combination of intricate artistic influences, local, Indian, Iranian, Greco-Roman, and Central Asian. An artistic fusion whose influence extended from Kapisa to Xinjiang. The use of stucco and clay allowed modelers to represent, among other things, monks and donors with increasingly individualized faces, some approaching portraiture. More relevant to our topic, this material also enabled the depiction of demons with increasingly exaggerated features bordering on caricature. Their works reflect the desire to engage and impact the viewer through the exaggeration of the emotion, particularly by intensifying the violence of facial expression. The numbers of modeled heads representing demons discovered around the main stupa 68 at Tapakalan in Haḍḍa suggest that at least one of its faces was decorated with a modeled representation of the assault of Māra. Let's start by examining this demon dressed in a fur coat with a hood that he adjusts with both hands around his neck. His reptilian posture, advancing with a curved body, emphasizes this malicious intent. The face of this enigmatic character, who appears to be sneaking, expresses suffering and passion. He is a tempter, a demon. The garment is rendered with finesse, highlighting the body and its movement. Joseph Haken suggested that this highly detailed figure could represent Māra, diverging from the Gandhāran canon, where he most often appears at the handsome Māra, as we just seen. Remember that he is not described as the god with the bow in the Lalita Vistara. Next, let's focus on these demons, with hair stranding on end, styled into short flame-like shapes on the head. We remember their heads flaming with the hair streaming upward in the Lalita Vistara. The face is grimacing. It has a wide open mouth showing prominent teeth. The menacing expression is heightened by bulging eyes and a furious gaze. The human ears are deformed with enlarged lobes. Here we found the flaming hair, bulging eye, and monstrous teeth described in the text. Let's now look at this hybrid demon with an animal-like face, possibly canine. The hair is styled into flame-like spikes, forming two small frontal horns. The wide open eyes gives him a fixed and hallucinatory gaze. He has a wide open mouth, sweeping flames, and shows a formidable set of teeth along with boar tusks. The ears are those of a bovine. Here is a hybrid demon whose upper face is human, but with a mouth that is widely slit like a dog's, boar tusk and bovine ears. He wears a partially broken helmet from which a horn emerge. With his mouth slightly open, he lets his pointed tongue hang out, evoking a painted dog. Now let's examine this demon with an animal head, shown in three-quarter view, along with two curved horns. The head is titled backward, with the gaze directed upward. He raises a monstrous hand to its bare chest. The broad animal mouth reveals prominent teeth as he vomits what he appears to be his lungs or perhaps one of his organs. This depiction recalls the very visceral description in the Lalita Vitara Sutra. It seems as this type of representation, absent from most of Gandhāra bas-reliefs, is directly inspired by those descriptions. Next, we see this demon with a human face and hair bristling in flame-like forms, adorned with a wide headband. The bulging, lidless eyes give him a hallucinatory appearance. Two boar tusks protrude from his mouth. Among its peers, this demon with a human face is more grotesque than demonic. Its hair is represented in a simplistic manner with a sort of bowl cut, where the straight, flattened hair is depicted by parallel incisions. It sports a broad smile, revealing boar tusks and incisors separated by a wide diastema. The smile combined with the wide open eyes enhances the grotesque character. Let us also examine this demon with tousled hair and sunken eyes, casting a furious glance. An unusual bristling mustache tops his mouth, which is widely split open. Unfortunately, the next head is broken and fragmentary. The demon displays a half animal, half human face, grotesque and terrifying, with hair bristling in the shape of flames and drooping ears similar to those of a dog or maybe an elephant. He stretches his mouth with one hand, revealing prominent teeth, and it is possible that it makes the same gesture with the other hand. Here, the demonic figure appears as an emaciated, mature man. He wears short hair with his mustache and chin shaved. His eyes are closed, giving the impression of sleep. However, with both hands, this demon is tearing his head off its neck, exposing the flesh and vertebrae of its spine. Again, this recalls a specific description found in the Lalita Vistara. Let us also examine this demon with an animal-like face, combining bovine and canine features. A mad expression is evident in the bulging eye of this monster with curved horns and animal ears, as he tears out his tongue with one hand, revealing a fearsome set of teeth. Now let's also see this demon, whose skull elongates into a pointed spiral, like the top of its ears. His features are those of a human with a broad nose and a strong, almost prognathous jaw. The furrowed brows give it a dark and furious expression. Let us continue with this terrifying demon, half human, half animal, with hair bristling in the shape of flames. One of his eyes is bulging without eyelid. From the other protrudes a spiraling tentacle. It opens its mouth, from which emerges a monstrous bovine tongue and possibly a tusk. But time is running out. I will simply show you the following one without dwelling on the description. As a member of the trading cohort of demon, this skeleton personifies death. Here, a grotesque demon with a human face and elephant ears grimaces in pain. These two demons looks very similar, likely created by the same artists. The faces are partly human, partly canine. The terrifying mouth has fearsome teeth and boar tusks. The first one is crushing a bone. The second left his tongue hang out. Curious sharp points emerge from its temple, and we remember the mansion with ear upright like spikes, according to the Buddha Charita. The two following demons are represented as Brahmins, with an open mouth revealing large pointed teeth. And I often wondered if they were holding a serpent, as seen in Gandhāran bas-reliefs. Let's also consider the following figures, demons taking on the appearance of soldiers. The first one is grimacing. The face is disturbing with furrowed brows and cruel expression. It smiles, showing prominent teeth. The second has an idealist face of a Western inspiration. Neither deformed nor grimacing, the face is beautiful and severe. The hair is standing upright in large tuft like flames. Finally, observe this chubby and toothless demon with the mouth twisted in a grimace of pain or sadness, and this disheveled demon with a distorted, monstrous human face. This representation echoes the mention of distorted faces and bodies in all the text. So as this brief analysis demonstrates, like the artist of Gandhāra, the artist of Haḍḍa possessed a deep understanding of literary tradition and got extensive inspiration from them, but they also add amusement, adding their own creative touch. From the monotony that prevail in representation of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, these characters provided an opportunity for the artists to unleash their imagination and, I believe, to develop their artistic technicality and creative audacity. The texts themselves clearly state that these warriors had the ability to transform in countless ways. This provides a fertile ground for imagining all sorts of monstrous creatures in the most frightening or repulsive postures. I am convinced that the artists understood this and seized this opportunity. In any case, they undoubtedly brought this creature to life at Haḍḍa. And allow me to digress for a moment. We have just detailed the characteristic and iconographic clues that reveal the demonic nature of a character. At Haḍḍa, these characteristics are found on some figures in an atlas-like position, pretending to support the architraves that crown the different bodies of the stupas. I have put forward a hypothesis regarding the representation of the demon warriors in this particular posture and their symbolic value. In our context, the depiction of Māra's armies as hybrid warriors on the stupas in this particular atlas-like support position seems neither trivial or purely decorative. This space was presumably occupied by simple yakshas and Gandhāras in Indian art, which aligns with our hypothesis that the army's demons with a southern aspect are identified in the text as yakshas that adopt all these grimacing forms. I believe that their presence on the stupa could symbolically represent the Buddha victory over these armies, which he not only defeated but also subdued, as reported in the Lalita Vistara. Their architectonic role, supporting the bodies of the stupa, decorated in honor of the Buddha with relief depicting episodes from his legend or multiplying his images, seems to support this interpretation. The legendary episode of the assault of Māra immediately precedes that of the Enlightenment, meaning it precedes Siddhartha's attainment of Buddhahood. It does not merely introduce it, but makes it possible. Because he has conquered, because he has demonstrated his superiority, and because he has renounced all desire, Siddhartha is now capable of attaining enlightenment. If we accept the idea that the Atlas-like warriors symbolically evoke the defeat of Māra, the victory of Siddhartha is way to achieving enlightenment. Perhaps we can go further and consider that the decoration of such stupas gradually took on the form of an allegorical representation of enlightenment. We know that the Buddhist monasteries of Haḍḍa were occupied and ruled by the Sarvastivadin sect, a branch of Theravada Buddhism. Moreover, the Lalita Vistara Sutra is considered to be an intermediate text between those of the Theravada and Mahasangika traditions, and it is sometimes regarded as belonging to the Sarvastivadin school, while at other times as a Mahayana Sutra. Many discoveries, particularly the discovery of the Bajor manuscripts, has revolutionized the understanding of the two major schools of Buddhism previously considered opposed and incompatible. Indeed, in the library of these monasteries, Theravada and Mahayana documents were found side by side. Gerard Wolfsman already suggested that it seems reasonable to think that some famed monastic sites may have housed both Theravada and served as a cradle for Mahayana speculations, suggesting that Theravadin and Mahasangika monks likely lived in the same monasteries, practiced and meditated in the same manner, participated in the same celebrations, even if they not did share the same conception of ultimate liberation. According to our thorough examination of the decoration, the iconography of the Haḍḍa monasteries reflect, through its artistic preferences, this simultaneous influence of literary tradition derived from Theravadin and Mahasangika precepts. But let's set aside this consideration and take a quick look at India, specifically in Maharashtra, near Aurangabad, at the famous Ajanta caves, where a high relief representation of the attack of Māra armies adorns the east wall of the cave, 96, dated from the 5th century CE. Cave number 26 is a vaulted chaitya featuring a colonnade that forms a nave with a stupa in the center. The ambulatory allowing for Padakshinapata is decorated with iconic scenes from the Buddha life, including a Mahaparinirvana and the Maravijaya, the assault of Māra. The configuration of the space makes photography difficult, so I have added a drawing of the scene sketched in 1880 by Burgess. At the center of the composition, the future Buddha is seated in Bhumispasa Mudra under the protective foliage of the Bodhi tree. In the foreground, to the left of the relief, to the right of the Buddha, is depicted, Māra is depicted as a handsome youth, the one with flower arrows and the colorful bow. To the right of the relief, his three daughters are surrounded by their attendants, wearing headdresses and jewelry, almost entirely naked. Here is a close-up view. In the upper register, the demonic army is deployed, surrounding a warrior shown as a Devaputra mounted on an elephant, clumped together several warriors with human or animal heads, armed and in threatening postures, displaying a second face on their lower abdomen. A lion-headed figure is depicted eating his own hand, and there are also boars and jackal faces. Most of them wield weapons or have their arms raised, threatening the Bodhi tree and the Bodhisattva. Symmetrically, also gathered around a demon mounted on an elephant, the members of the demonic cohort are more often depicted as human warriors. On either side of the Bodhi tree, two warriors cross their sword toward it. The composition follows the continuous narration process. The high relief represents both the attack of Māra and his defeat, failure and retreat of his armies. So to the right of the relief, in the second register, a group of warriors is turning away from the Bodhisattva, trying to run away, some on the ground, others with the hand joined in Anjali Mudra in gesture of supplication. So what can we deduce for our demonstration? Again, the iconography attests to the artist's thorough knowledge of the text and the inspiration they drew from them. However, it is noted that the types of characters depicted, like those in Gandhāran bas-reliefs, are more closely related to the description in the Buddha Charita and the Mahavastu. There is no depiction of demons devouring themselves, except the lion eating his hand, or devouring each other. There is no depiction of demons vomiting their organs, mutilating themselves, as described in the Lalita Vistara and so beloved in represented in Haḍḍa's art. It is well known that ancient art school had a pronounced taste for horrific representation, such as skeletal depictions of Kali. Therefore, it can be assumed that this absence is not due to an aesthetic choice, but rather reflects a preference or predominance of one literary tradition over another. So at the beginning of this presentation, we raised several questions. To what extent do artists strive to adhere to the text in their representations? What roles does imagination play in the creative process? Through the analysis of images, can we discern which narrative had a predominant influence on a specific artistic school? And what could this teach us about religious practices in a particular monastery? We said it numerous times. The iconography of this representation shows the artist's in-depth knowledge of the legend and the depiction of demonic figures in the literary tradition. On the other hand, the episode itself provided an exceptional opportunity for the artist with the 1,000 forms that demons could take, opening a vast field for imagination. Everything became conceivable, and the demonic characters of Haḍḍa stand as an impressive artistic translation of this creativity. Moreover, at Haḍḍa, it seems that the primary source of inspiration comes from the depiction of demons as detailed in the Lalitavistara. They are literally monstrous, cannibalistic, organic aspects, features that are not as clearly defined or as insistently presented in the Buddha Charita and the Mahavastu, and which are scarcely visible in the Gandhāran and Indian example we have examined, are extensively illustrated there. And finally, by studying the literary tradition, compared it with a detailed analysis of the iconography and decoration, we can propose cautiously hypotheses about the religious practices that took place within it. Thus, the iconography of the monasteries of Haḍḍa, and particularly Tapakalan, at least at one epoch, particularly faithful to the description in the Lalitavistara, suggests a shared presence of the Theravada and Mahasangika tradition. Thank you very much.